The place to start, obviously. The same place we started late Saturday on Inside College Basketball, CBS Sports Network. And that place is Rupp Arena. What a scene in Lexington. Final score, Arkansas 89, Kentucky 79. Even though it did not pop into my head until mid-podcast Friday, John Calipari, he did it. He entered with a team that was just 1-6 in the SEC, missing its best NBA prospect. Still, he guided Arkansas to an upset of Kentucky in his first game against the program he previously coached, to 4 Final Fours, and, of course, the 2012 National Championship. He was booed when he was introduced to the crowd. He smirked for the camera, but by the time the game was over, lots of those same booing fans, they weren't even around anymore. Cal sent them to the exits early. Is this going to flip the script on Arkansas season? I'm skeptical. Rest assured, I think UK remains on the right side of this breakup for now, but John Calipari did win the weekend. That's for sure. So Norlander, let me bring you into this by just asking you what you make of everything that went down at Rupp Arena on Saturday night.
Yeah, it became the biggest story in college basketball. You led Inside College Basketball with it. We did lead CBS Sports. David Cobb flew up. We did CBS Sports HQ studio work together on Saturday night. That was a good time. And we went deep into the night, and this was supposed to lead the HQ. We're going to get into this game. We are coming off what I truly believe will be one of the 3 or 4 biggest days of consequence and noise and headlines and everything in the sport of basketball in 2025. I mean, the Luka Anthony Davis thing felt so surreal. It broke in as we were just finishing, and then that completely flipped everything upside down and upstaged the Calipari stuff. But this comes on a day where you had 11 ranked teams lose. 10 of those 11 lost to teams in which I believe they were the favorites. 5 top 15 teams lost at home. You had teams go out, and Arkansas joins the likes of Kansas State, USC, Georgia Tech. We'll get to those later on, but these are all teams that got really big wins on Saturday, and yet none of those teams could wind up in the NCAA tournament. You had huge losing streaks come across the board with Houston and Michigan State and Louisville and Iowa State. We're going to get to all of that. And Calipari going in and actually doing this with his, and let me be clear here, and his players, to me, makes it even more memorable, because the entrance, like we all waited, what were they going to respond with? It was more boos than cheers, but it wasn't on the level of what Pitino received in 2001. It seemed a little bit mixed there. Get into the gameplay as well, but then there was like the super weird thing, like the game is over. Some of the Kentucky fans started booing. Maybe they were still booing Cal. Maybe they were booing Mark Pope. Maybe they were booing Amari Williams, who had an amazing game. I don't know. It was a surreal scene. And then Cal, he runs off the floor.
Yeah.
Alyssa Lang was doing the sideline for ESPN. That she gets him, and then he gets caught. Did you see the clip where, like,
yeah,
he's like doing? I don't know what he was doing, but like he's on a live television interview, and then he's yelling at him like he's one of his kids. Dude, there was so much about Saturday that was insane. I want to get into the game, but I want to just ping this right back to you. I don't want to go on too long. What were your thoughts on just, I don't know, the overall vibe surrounding that game before, during, and after?
Well, so we talked on Friday about what we thought it might look and sound like, what I personally, or at least how I personally felt it should look and sound like, or at least if the building was filled with people who have a similar mindset to me. And it wasn't exactly that, but it wasn't vicious. It obviously wasn't violent. John took it in stride, whatever. Let's not say another word about that. And then the game starts, and I think there has to be something to the idea that the buildup is too long and too intense, and it takes a toll on the home team players who are supposed to make sure they don't lose this game, because it feels like more of an event than a game. That's what K's final game at Cameron Indoor felt like. I remember having a similar conversation. Like, it was just so intense, and it was so big, and then the game started, and the players weren't, it felt unusual, and they didn't show up. And I think you could say the same thing about the Kentucky guys. Like Matt Jones from Kentucky Sports Radio tweeted something along the lines of, and he's been in that place his whole life, and it was like, I don't remember the building ever feeling like this or looking like this in anticipation of a game. And they've obviously had lots of incredibly big games there, but this was different for obvious reasons. And I can't quantify it, right? It's not a tangible thing, but I think there's got to be something there that the buildup is counterproductive for the home team who just cannot lose this game no matter what. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so a few takeaways on that. One, keep in mind they didn't have Lamont Butler, which was clearly a factor. They still don't have Kirk Kriisa back, but they've won games without Kriisa. But still, Kentucky was not a full force, and neither obviously was Arkansas. They didn't have Boogie Fland, and not having Fland, to me it looked like Arkansas collectively as a program, their players, it was under discussed. The DJ Wagner, Adu Thero, Zvonimir Avicic, those three players who wore Kentucky threads a season ago, they combine for 52 points by themselves. Okay. And then Janelle Davis had one of his 2 or 3 best games in an Arkansas uniform. He's underperformed this entire season for the most part. He looks good. And Kentucky, although I want to be clear about this, there were other factors in this. When I watched this game play out, it looked like Kentucky was filled with a bunch of guys that weren't emotionally invested in this game. You understand why it would mean something to Mark Pope. You understand why it means a ton to John Calipari. If anything, I thought he downplayed it after the fact more than I really thought that he would. And you would understand why Arkansas is a program, because they're desperate. They need a win like this. Kentucky did not rise to meet the moment, and that was clear. From an X&O standpoint, yet again, the defensive lapses are a significant issue. I thought having no Butler I thought it was glaring in this game, and I'm not saying if had he played, it definitely would have been different. You can't convince me otherwise that it wouldn't have been more competitive and much closer, but credit to Calipari and Arkansas, because where has this been? Like, credit and where have you been all season? We talked about it on HQ, and I apologies, but obviously because of my studio duties, I didn't see what you're doing on ICB. But it was asked, like, all right, is this gonna change Arkansas season? My answer is no, right. And I don't say this cynically. I just say it as pragmatically. This is a 13-8 team that is now 2-5, 2-6 in its last 8 games overall, and still is staring down road games against Texas A&M, Auburn, and 3 of its next 5, and one of the home games is against Alabama. So if Calipari and his team are able to really reverse course, that'd be incredible. I don't think that was I really don't think that's the case whatsoever. But it was good gains, a memorable night, and the kind of result that we will, as we sit here on Sunday, Parrish, I know that we will talk about and remember this game. Even if Arkansas winds up being bad for the rest of the season, it will still be a memorable thing. I thought we'd remember it because of the way that Calipari going back and him being how he was received. That's not going to, in my opinion, 10, 15, 20 years from now, that's not what we're going to remember about this game. We're going to remember it that Arkansas was probably bad in year 1 under Calipari, and whatever comes after this as his tenure there. And Kentucky was largely pretty good immediately. And then that one game they had scheduled against each other that first season, Arkansas went in and kicked their ass. A really weird result. If I'm a Kentucky fan, I'm nervous, man, because we continue to lose these games where you have really bad defensive lapses, and I'm just telling you, I really do think it's going to nip them in the bud once we get to March.
I'm with you on Arkansas. I think they had a great day. I don't know that it's going to be a season-changing anything, because there's some like statistical stuff that it makes it very easy to understand what happened inside Rupp Arena. I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it, but let me try. A bad 3-point shooting team that doesn't take a lot of threes typically took a bunch and made a bunch, and they won on the road. That's what happened. Arkansas was 13 of 25 from 3. It's 52%.
Pick the perfect time. The irony of that, keep going, GB. The irony is that Kentucky fans have moaned for years, rightfully so, that the Calipari coach UK teams would have these opponents come into Rupp and they wouldn't be good 3-point shooting teams, and then they'd find their groove in that building somehow, and then cosmically his team winds up doing that, being 52% from beyond the arc.
Right. So 13 of 25 from 3. They shot more threes than normal and made way more than normal. On the season, I'll just give you some numbers. They make 33.5% of their 3-point attempts. Against Kentucky, they made 52%. On the season, 29.4% of their points come on 3-pointers. Against Kentucky, that number jumped to 43.8%. On the season, they attempt 37.6% of their field goal attempts from beyond the arc. Against Kentucky, that number, again, jumped to 43.1%. So it was more threes than normal, way more makes than normal, and that's a recipe for an upset on the road. But I don't know that that's replicable. In fact, I'm certain it's not. So keep in mind, that was an amazing moment, an amazing performance. Arkansas is still 2-6 in its past 8 games and still missing its best NBA prospect. So I'm skeptical, especially under the assumption that Boogie Flane's not going to play again for the Razorbacks. They can be better, they can be better, but I'd bet against them digging out of this hole that they've created and making the NCAA tournament. They're still just 3-8 in the first 2 quadrants. They've only got 2 quadrant 1 wins. The resume is still unworthy of NCAA tournament consideration, but we'll see.
Yeah, Arkansas only had 8 turnovers as well, which I thought was key. The how well they took care of the ball. All 5 starters got into double figures, which was key. And that combined with Andrew Carr, he's not 100%. I think he had 2 points or maybe 3. Kobe Brea had 5 points. Weird game for Kentucky. We'll see we'll see. I don't want to call it a one-off because in some ways it is a one-off, the circumstances there, but Kentucky's got a weird thing developing here where one, they've lost 3 of 4, problematic. And the win, well, they went on the road at Tennessee earlier in the week, but they seem to be playing up against like or above competition. And there's some teams that aren't as good as Kentucky, and some of it's understandable. You went on the road against Georgia, but Georgia waxed you. So they're a little bit unpredictable in that regard. And I think that's what you get. I think that is, broadly speaking, a function of when you have a really, really good, effective offense and a pedestrian defense. These kind of results can happen. And so now we'll preview the games to know upcoming here at the end of the pod, but they got a road test against another good SEC team upcoming there. But I love a good plot twist, and this was certainly that. I'll also say my last thought on this, because we mentioned this on the HQ show as well. You get this often, not always, but often across all sports. On nights where you're raising a banner, getting a championship ring, welcoming back a big-time player or coach for whatever reason, or there's reason for high anticipation that makes the average ticket price for that game way above what it otherwise normally would be. You see in the NBA, you see across all sports. Sometimes the home team does in fact win, but sometimes you got these big letdown moments. We said it as we previewed it before this game, and I even played. I brought it up. I was like, I wonder if that's going to wind up being a thing here. Lo and behold, it did. Now both these parties can put this behind them and turn toward February and just the gauntlet that is the SEC.